Good afternoon, and welcome to A Glimpse of the Feminine. I want to start out today by giving a trigger warning. I am going to be talking about stillbirth and infant loss. Today is about my son Tucker. Tuck was born the end of July, so we're coming up on his birthday, and one of the ways I honor his memory is by talking about him. And one of the ways that I have always tried to, in my way as his mama, give meaning to his life is by talking about him and by taking what I learned through that loss and trying to help other moms who are grieving. And so today's going to be kind of unstructured. I'm going to go through his baby book that I put together. He'll be 22 in a few days. And so it's been a while. And so I'm just going to read his birth story. I'm going to talk about some things, but I'm also just going to read some things that meant a lot to me in that immediate time afterwards, and things that I wrote in that time afterwards. Tucker shares my mom's birthday. I was so excited to have a child that would share a birthday with their Grammy. And that was one of the big questions I had for God. Like, why would you give my mom that excitement of having a grandchild sharing her birthday and then take him? And I don't know the answer to that. And I won't until I get to heaven. I'm going to apologize right from the outset. There will be tears today. Sometimes I get through Tuck's birthday and there really aren't any tears. It's more than just another day, because we always take time to recognize. Sometimes we do birthday cakes, sometimes we release balloons, various things. And sometimes I am just a puddle all day long, and I never know how his birthday's going to hit. But I know in sharing his story with you today, there will be tears. So, with that being said, let's get started. I'm going to try to do this without hitting the mic too many times. I didn't want to take his book apart, so I'll be trying to maneuver his book. I'm going to keep specific dates out, just because. Tucker's birth story. So for each of my children, I write their birth story out for them in their scrapbook. And I decided that I would do the same for Tuck. My water broke at approximately 11:30 p.m. on Saturday evening. Daddy called the midwife and then Grammy and the rest of the people on our call list. Your brothers were already spending the night with Grammy and Pack, but your sisters were at home. Since it was late, we were afraid that they would get woke up while I was laboring and needed attention, so Grammy came down and took them home to her house. It was shortly after midnight when Grammy got here, so I asked if this meant that we didn't have to buy her a birthday present. We were so excited that you were going to be born on Grammy's birthday. The midwife had arrived shortly before Grammy, and she began setting up her birth supplies in the girls' room. Daddy and I had gotten out the birthing things that we had here, and after Grammy left, I got into the shower. I hoped that the hot water would help me relax and really get labor going. Soon after I got out of the shower, the second midwife arrived. At around 1 or 1:30 a.m., Daddy went outside and called into the house saying that he could see the northern lights. So the midwives and I went outside to see them. I thought, what a special addition to your birth story this would be, since we don't get to see the northern lights that often. And one of the midwives joked that we could name you Aurora Borealis. We went back into the house and sat and visited for a while. I was getting sleepy. It was late, almost 2 a.m., and having had a hot shower, a nap was looking pretty good. The main midwife suggested that I sleep if I could, so when my labor picked up, I would be rested. So we all went to bed. I woke up at about 4 a.m. to strong contractions. Your daddy woke up and said he thought that he would go upstairs to sleep. I told him, "No, you won't. We're having a baby." Daddy woke the midwives up and I got into the birthing pool. I was feeling dehydrated, so Daddy got some ice water for me. I had several contractions in the water, but I felt so hot. I took a drink of water and I just knew I was going to be sick. I got out of the tub and ran to the bathroom, and I could hear Daddy saying, "She won't throw up. She hates to be sick." Just as I was throwing up. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor in the hall in your daddy's arms. He must have carried me to the bed, because the next thing I remember was being on the bed, lying on my side, trying to stay relaxed through contractions and not push. I really wanted to just let my body birth you and not force it. I would have a contraction, and then you would kick me. After 2 or 3 times of getting kicked like that, I told your daddy that he would need to spank you after you were born. I remember looking out the window and thinking what a bright, beautiful day it was, and how it would only be a short time until I would be holding you in my arms. I felt like my body couldn't work efficiently on my side, so Daddy and the midwives helped me get up onto the birthing stool. I finally began to push with the contractions. When your head was delivered, the midwife said, "You've got to push the rest of him out now." So I pushed until you were delivered. The midwife lifted your limp body onto the bed, and the umbilical cord hit my leg. I said, "The cord broke." The midwives echoed, "Oh my God, the cord broke?" And they immediately began CPR. Daddy called 911, and they requested they send out MedStar. Then they began calling friends and family, asking for a miracle. We talked to you. We prayed over you. We pleaded with you to fight, to live. We begged God to breathe the breath of life into your body. After almost 45 minutes, the helicopter arrived. afterward, our dearest friends and pastor for the church across the street came to the house. The MedStar crew could do nothing for you. They did put a tube in and give you a couple of shots trying to get your heart going. But it had been too long. Daddy and I asked them to leave you alone. You were officially declared dead about an hour after your birth. My dear friends lovingly cleaned you up and dressed you. And then they helped get me cleaned up. You were born straight into the arms of Jesus at 5:48 a.m. on a Sunday morning. After approximately 6 hours of labor. The midwives made a valiant effort to revive you, but it was not to be. Your little heart never took a beat outside of my womb. Your lungs never drew breath. Your eyes opened only to see the wonders of heaven. I thank God for eternity, where we will know and hold you, though we could not in this time and place. One of my dearest friends wrote, "The midwives marveled at how patiently Tracy awaited the time. Baby Tucker was born a little before 6 a.m. He weighed 9 pounds and was 21 3/4 inches long, with dark, thick hair. However, the cord had broke while he was in the birth canal, and he was born not breathing. He went straight from his mama's loving womb into the arms of Jesus. By 7 a.m., our 3 families were here, along with the medical team from the helicopter, the midwives, the pastor, and the ambulance crew, all doing whatever they could to show their love to this beautiful family. From cleaning the kitchen in militant style, that was one of the husbands, to holding the children. Their Grammy had brought them back down. Washing and dressing baby Tucker and just sitting with Mama. Tucker was a beautiful baby boy in the true family likeness. The children came with Grammy and held him. In the midst of all the grieving, there was a strong presence of the love of Christ. I apologize. Almost from the very beginning, we saw evidence of God in the midst of all of it. Where we live, we very rarely have fog. And the morning Tucker was born was a beautiful, bright, blue sky morning. And when our friends started arriving, so the way we're situated, if you're coming from the north, you top this hill and you can see our place. And our house was surrounded by a cloud. Not the barn, not the valley, just the house. They all thought that the helicopter was already at the house because they knew we had called for the bird. But it wasn't. They beat it. As part of the sermon that was given at Tucker's funeral, the pastor talked about clouds. And in the Bible, clouds are associated with the presence of God. Something like 90% or more of the time that clouds are mentioned in Scripture, they are the presence of God. And I truly believe that God was physically here that morning. That he knew I needed him in more than just a spiritual way. One of the things I did one of the things I'm really thankful for is we had my mom bring the kids down. My oldest chose to stay with his grandpa and go with him, but the rest of the kids came down. And after Tucker was all cleaned up, we let them come in, and they sat and they held him and they spent time with him. And I think that was really important. I had talked afterwards with so many older people who had lost siblings when they were kids. And time after time, it was, the doctor came to the house and then we were told my brother or sister had died and nothing was ever said again. Or, the mom went to the hospital to have the baby and then they came home without a baby. And so many adults were so traumatized by the fact that they never got the opportunity to grieve their sibling. And and I just really, it was important for us. I guess we didn't even contemplate any other way but for the kids to come and hold him and spend time together grieving. One of the odder aspects of Tuck's story is that about 6 weeks or so before he was born, our oldest daughter was not quite 4. And she came to me at least twice and asked me when our baby was going to die. That's not typically a question that a little kid asks. And so I would just look at her and I would say, I don't know. I hope he has a wonderful long life, but none of us know how long we're going to live. So I don't know when he's going to die. And I look back on that now and I wonder if God was trying to prepare my heart a little bit. I didn't get it, but I don't know why else a 3-year-old would ask those questions. We knew that he was going to be a boy. I had actually had a very thorough ultrasound within 2 months or so of him being born. And everything looked great. And we knew at that point that he was going to be a boy. And so everybody had been calling him. It wasn't just the baby, it was Tucker. We were calling him by his name, the kids and my ex and I. And so it was, even for the kids, even though they hadn't actually held the baby yet, the loss was a very real thing to them because we'd been calling him by his name. He was already a person to them. I had a friend send me a book, and I'm going to put in the show notes 3 books that meant a lot to me during that time. One of them had writings from men of the church in the past and things they had written when they had lost children. And a couple of them I put into Tucker's scrapbook because they really spoke to me. One of them was written by Robert L. Dabney. He was a Southern Presbyterian pastor in the 1800s. He was an architect, and he was also Stonewall Jackson's chief of staff and biographer. Please do not get sidetracked by his politics. This is about, he was a grieving father. He wrote, I have learned rapidly in the school of anguish this week. and am many years older than I was a few days ago. Ah, when the mighty wings of the angel of death nestle over your heart's treasures, and his black shadow broods over your home, it shakes the heart with a shuddering terror and a horror of great darkness. To see my dear little one ravaged, crushed, and destroyed, and to feel myself as helpless to give any aid, this tears my heart with anguish. One of the things I did within the first day or two was to sit down and begin making note of the things that I had to be thankful for. Now, do not misunderstand me. I was not thankful for the circumstance. I was completely and totally shattered by the loss of my child. There were moments I didn't think I would survive. Your arms ache to hold the child that's gone. As a mother who's just given birth, your body's producing milk for a baby that isn't there. You've got all the postpartum aches. I had everything set up and ready for him, the cradle next to my bed, my nursing clothes all out. My mom, bless her heart, went to town and bought me some new nightgowns that weren't nursing gowns. So that my clothes wouldn't be mocking. But I knew even in that God was there, that he was in the midst of it. Tucker's cord broke just moments before he was born. And we don't know why. And it takes less than a minute for a newborn to bleed out. We were very thankful for the helicopter crew that stuck around, and they made sure to let our friends and family that were here with us know that even had we been in like the best of hospitals, they couldn't have saved him. In fact, we had heart tones on him until he was behind my pelvic bone. And when my midwife told me to push, it was because she saw suspicious blood. And so in Tucker's book, I have 2 pages of things that I was thankful for. And it was mostly people, but it was also circumstances that came into play that we hadn't originally planned on. The plan had not been for the kids to be at my mom's house. They were going to be home because when my younger daughter was born, the kids were supposed to go to my mom's house, and we called and let her know she needed to come get the kids. And by the time she got here, we had a baby. And so the plan was not for them to go anywhere. But it would have been so traumatic for them had they been here when the helicopter was coming in and the ambulance and all of that. And because he died when he did, he was perfect. He was perfect and beautiful. One of my dearest friend's husband was a pastor, and they were here to be with us on a Sunday morning instead of with their church. One of my other friend's father was the pastor of the church across the alley from ours. Our church happened to be without a pastor at the time, but we had 2 pastors here with us that morning, loving on us and caring for us. Our midwives were so competent, and they tried so hard, but nobody could have resuscitated him because he had no blood. And I'm sorry if some of the details are too much. Seeing people who loved us and loved our family holding my baby, standing and rocking back and forth with him, it was so tragic and beautiful at the same time for the amount of love that it showed. One of the other poems that meant a lot to me was written by Charles Wesley, who was one of the founders of the Methodist movement. Charles Wesley lived in the 1700s, and he wrote over 6,500 hymns and poems. But only one made it into my textbook. Wherefore should I make my moan? Now the darling child is dead. He to early rest is gone. He to paradise has fled. I shall go to him, but he never shall return to me. God forbids his longer stay. God recalls the precious loan. God hath taken him away from my bosom to his own. Surely what he wills is best. Happy in his will I rest. Faith cries out, it is the Lord. Let him do as seems him good. Be thy holy name adored. Take the gift a while bestowed. Take the child no longer mine. Thine he is, forever thine. One of the other things that was just like a little hug from God. My brother-in-law had given us a piece of granite that we could use for the headstone. And so we took it to the monument place to have it engraved. And a friend had given me a picture of Jesus holding a baby up against his chest and kissing his forehead. And for me, that was like a picture or a portrait of Tuck. And I thought if I could find something, just something kind of similar, but I really didn't think I'd be able to find that. And so I was preparing myself to find something to settle for. And looked through the first book, because they're like big photo albums full of this is what we can do on a monument. Max hands me the second book, and I open it up, and there is the picture. I wrote about it in Tucker's book, and I wrote, God knows how wrong this all feels to me. To hold your little body in my arms. To have to bury you. To order your headstone and decide where it's going to be placed. But he knew how important that picture was. And it was just like God hugging me and saying, I know how hard this is. We had a CD that we burned with music for the funeral. It had Hello, Goodbye by Michael W. Smith. And it had With Hope by Stephen Curtis Chapman. It had some Celtic music on it. It had a bagpipe version of Amazing Grace on it. I think one of the Celtic songs was called Almost Home or something like that. There were several songs on it. And I would set up the ironing board and I would turn that music on and I would iron and I would bawl. And it was healing. It was very, very healing to just cry and let it all out. And I would do that when the kids were other places or outside playing. I tried not to do that with them right there. There was a lot of grief and sadness, obviously, in our home, and so I tried not to do that too much with them. One of the things I did that helped with healing a lot was putting together his scrapbook. I tried to have it mostly done when we had his funeral, just to do some of the normal things like putting together a scrapbook that I did for all my babies. And it was so healing to do that. The boys and their dad built his casket. And we talked about him, and he was, part of our lives, even though he wasn't here. I had 3 books. One was Safe in the Arms of God by John MacArthur. That was very comforting to read. One was, my mom had picked me up a devotional called Grieving the Child I Never Knew. And I think it was about a 30-day devotional. And some of the devotions in it were like, whatever. That doesn't really apply. And some of them, we read them after we went to bed at night. And sometimes we would just weep. And the one book that meant the most to me, that really helped, was called From Grief to Glory: Spiritual Journeys of Mourning Parents by James W. Bruce III. And he lost a son, and part of his grieving process was going through Robert L. Dabney and Charles Wesley and Spurgeon, all these great men of the faith, the time frames in which they lived. You lost children. Some of them lost multiple children. I can remember reading that and thinking, oh God, please don't ever ask this of me again. I can't do it. But it was such an uplifting book to read. It wasn't a this is how you get through grief kind of thing. It was just the stories of other parents that had grieved and things that their friends or acquaintances had written to them, things they had written. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful book. And I'll put those in the show notes. When Jay was born, shortly after, we had a house fire. And Tuck's book isn't just his pictures and stuff. It's things I wrote. It's all the cards and letters and emails and stuff that people sent to us. And when the house burned, I thought I lost it. And I said to my oldest son, as we're talking, and like the fire's been put out, but the things are still smoldering. And I'm like, Tucker's book. And he said, Mom, that's the first thing I thought of. And he had gone in, and the bookshelf that the photo albums were on was in the main part of the house that burned, in the main area where it burned. And the bookshelf had burned down to just the shelf above. So like the shelf that didn't burn was the one that the photo albums were on. And then a piece of the roof fell in front of it and protected the books. So Tucker's book is in a new book, and some of the pages have a little bit of charring on them, a little tiny bit of smoke damage, but those books are intact. Tucker's book was intact. And it was just another time of God saying, I know this is important. This is running long, so I'm going to stop. If you've lost a child, you're not alone. And I'm so sorry. But you're not alone. If it's a fresh loss, I really highly recommend From Grief to Glory. That was probably the most helpful thing I read. I also want to tell you, it's okay to laugh. It's okay to feel joy. It may not feel like that's ever even going to be possible again. And I know, I get it. But especially if you have other children in your home, they were a saving grace, let me tell you. But sometimes we feel guilty if we smile or laugh or feel happy over something because our baby's gone. But Mama, Daddy, let me tell you, no child wants their parent to be sad all the time. And I'm not encouraging you to ignore your grief. That is not it at all. But don't feel guilty when the joy starts to come back a little bit, or you have moments where you can just feel some happiness. Because joy and happiness and living life honors your child. It honors their memory. Because kids want their parents happy. If you're sitting and sad, a little kid will come up and say, Mama, don't be sad. So by all means, grieve and mourn and lament. But don't forget to live. How very softly you tiptoed into my world. Almost silently. Only a moment. You stayed. But what an imprint your footsteps have left upon my heart. Thank you, Jesus, for Tucker Joe. A glimpse of the feminine is written and recorded by me, your host, Tracy. Produced by Mike Jones-Thames. Until next time.